let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes in employee.
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
I'm joined today for a very special new program that we're starting up here on OpenShift TV called the Level Up Hour. And this is actually led by my coworker and teammate, Langdon White. Langdon, please introduce yourself for everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Langdon White. I hail from actually dev advocacy originally at Red Hat. And then I went over to engineering for a while in RHEL land and worked heavily on the modularity and AppStream projects. And then now I have come to the cloud platforms TMM, or the technical marketing manager team. And I'm here to talk a little bit about why, RHEL people want to use containers and why they are a lot less or they can be super useful as just a, like an admin or even a developer, even without, kind of needing just to make your life kind of easier. And it'd be nice if I could talk this morning. Apparently I need more coffee. So this show is on the wrong slide, but there you go.
That's fine. It's totally fine. We embrace mistakes on this channel. It's totally fine.
Exactly. At least it's a soft launch for our first show.
Yeah.
So we're starting this new show basically explicitly to talk to kind of RHEL admins about why containers are useful and how they can kind of simplify your life.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this, the 69th episode of the Level Up Hour, which, as Langdon White so eloquently explained, is about containers, and beyond that, about Kubernetes and OpenShift, and really helping to bring that world of Red Hat Enterprise Linux admins into this new brave world of containers, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. And this is actually a very special episode with special guests. Okay, so first of all, let me do a reminder that we always ask you to like, subscribe, and share. That we have, after today, 69 episodes of the Level Up Hour, but in fact, today is our final Level Up Hour. It is our swan song. We are going out in glory. We think that this remains a very interesting topic for the world, but we think that we are now ready to transition that discussion into new and different ways. And of course, Red Hat offers a lot of different streaming options and opportunities, and we have our archive of all the wonderful Level Up Hours we've already had. So with that, let me introduce, first of all, myself. I'm Randy Russell, the Director of Certification at Red Hat. I'm joined by my co-host for this last episode, Jafar Traibi. Jafar, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Very nice to see you.
I'm doing great. You've been on holiday though, so you look relaxed, refreshed.
Exact. And wearing nice swag as well.
Oh yeah. We're having what we would call a prom dress moment here in the U.S. And so actually, we're also joined by our producer, the puppeteer behind it all, Ms. Stephanie Ford. Hi, Stephanie. Glad you unveiled. And then our special guests. We have, first of all, I'm going in reverse chronological order here. We have our former co-host from the Red Hat Enterprise Linux business unit, the legend himself. He has his own zip code. I mean, he is the man, the myth, the legend. Stabby Mick, Scott McBrien. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Randy and Jafar.
Nice shirt. Can we get another look at that?
Nice.
Pretty awesome. What possible number what could you possibly be referring to with that shirt? I couldn't imagine.
I don't know, but in 3 years, I guarantee you we're going to have a shirt with a 10 on it.
Gonna go out on a limb there. All right, and then our special guest, extra special guest, we have Mr. Langdon White, who, as we saw in that clip from episode 01, was in fact the inaugural host of the Level Up Hour, but who is now a clinical assistant professor at Boston University. So welcome.
Thank you. And it's funny to compare the the original version of the show to today's version of the show. Like I even see how cleaned up I am, right? Like much less the rest of the show. So I went to contacts. Like it's been a whole run. And just to pitch my other show as well. There's also I'm still doing KBE Insider for Red Hat. So in fact, if you got here a little early on Twitch, that's what the show from yesterday that was playing. But yeah, it's awesome to be here. I'm so excited that the show got so far, and I am also very sad, that maybe this will be the last episode.
Well, there's no maybe about it. It is so the last episode, but it'll be a wonderful episode, and we have had a great run with a lot of very informative content that we will actually be revisiting in this episode. We can't revisit all of it, or it would be the Level Up 68 hours.
Right, exactly.
So we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there, and I can't claim that every minute of those 68 hours was actually especially great, but many of them were, and therefore people should hit that archive. But before we dive into our lovely set of clips and so on, I need to talk a little bit about a subject that is near and dear to all of our hearts as I try to, well, there we go. Thank you, Steph. See, like I said, the puppeteer we're going to talk about swag because, as it happens, Langdon was bemoaning that, he doesn't have nearly enough swag anymore and basically goes to work with Red Hat stuff. And so actually, we want to talk a little bit about the Level Up program more broadly and about some of the kinds of things that we can do, right? So first of all, the Level Up program, of which this show is just a part, is something that we are doing to introduce people to OpenShift and to make it more widely available. And so, look, there are ways to get complimentary access to fully supported OpenShift, other Red Hat subscriptions, discounted Red Hat OpenShift training. There's all kinds of things that we're wanting to do here. You see some of these URLs in the slide. And, even though the Level Up Hour will be coming to a close after today, the Level Up program remains something that we're very committed to at Red Hat because we think this is, the next frontier for so many of our Red Hat technical community, right? So, one of the things that
I want to add one thing there. It's like one thing I really have been found really exciting over the last, I don't know, let's say like 4, maybe 5 years at Red Hat, right? Was that how much more access to kind of the official product set was available to, just people, right? Like in all kinds of different, scenarios and everything else, you can actually use the Red Hat products directly without having to rely on, the fact that it's open source. You can actually use the official distributed ones. And like this program, when we started it 2 years ago, along with the developer program, like it's been really awesome. And, I still recommend it to students, and, because students typically, right, never have any money. So I wanted to point out like how awesome these programs have been.
Well, that's a great point, Langdon, is that we've sort of come full circle, right? Because my introduction to Red Hat many years ago was, when it was just something that I bought, a CD from Cheap Bytes for $2, and it was very, very accessible. And then, we inaugurated the subscription model and a different way of doing business and a much more expanded business, right? And I think we've come full circle in the sense that allowing people to touch the technology and actually get their hands in there and just sort of see what it works like with the actual thing, as opposed to cobbling it together, themselves out of source. I think it really does actually benefit us and benefit that user community. So good call out on that. So on this Level Up Hour program, everything else, here's the thing. There's free OpenShift subscriptions, discounted training, and I said the word earlier, I should have held out, but I wanted to kind of tease a bit, is that there is some free swag available. Okay. And that free swag, I think maybe, Stephanie, there is a URL that possibly you could drop for people to see and know, including Langdon, who apparently is getting a little bit threadbare in his wardrobe.
Yeah, sometimes I have to wear non-Red Hat, socks on occasion.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, there's some great things, including this, basically, right? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yes, there is free swag, and I'm dropping the secret code in the chat. Yeah.
Ooh, the cosmic power of the secret.
And I can't believe I missed this. Only have a sweatshirt.
A sweatshirt.
The sweatshirt's
Right.
really nice. It really is. I have the much like Randy does. I have the scarf hanging in my office as well.
So, it's like a loincloth. How dare you? All right. So we've settled our situation with the swag, I think. Everybody loves swag. And so with that, I think
I have to jump in again on the swag, though, because
by all
everybody else
means,
showed
get
off
in
their
there.
shirt. So I just ran DevConf US, a couple weeks ago. This is the exclusive volunteer, staff swag shirt. It's very nice. It's soft and cushy. So next year, you should definitely either volunteer and help out with the conference, or you should, otherwise you can't get the cool shirts. You can come and speak, though, and you get a really nice jacket. And that's what we did for speakers. So DevConf US, we like to plug all the things. I just wanted to throw it out there because we showed off the RHEL 9 shirt and we showed off the Level Up shirt. So
only fair. Yeah, Steph, what have you?
Oh,
got?
that's the original Level Up Hour shirt sweatshirt. That was pretty sweet too.
A throwback.
Okay, now I'm jealous.
One of the things about swag for this show is, 40 episodes we tried to get people swag for the sweet internet points, and it's the only challenge I've ever had getting swag at Red Hat. We changed vendors, and then we couldn't decide on a design, and we went back and forth. But yeah, so we ended up with those somewhat exclusively for like the hosts, and then and eventually we got to the green ones, which I think are really nice. The sweatshirt is really awesome.
Yeah, this is definitely a different kind of teal turquoise color.
Well, here's the swag. Actually, you mentioned the sweet internet points. This is something that our longtime viewers would be familiar with, the sweet internet points. And what they might not know is that the calculation of the sweet internet points was actually, you developed a system for that, Langdon, right?
I did, and as some of the longtime viewers of the show would know, I occasionally had bugs, and so I would get these emails saying, why did I have the wrong number of points? And I'd be like, oh, because I can't math. It was funny because the whole show
gets 10,000 T-shirts.
Yeah, exactly. But it actually used a container so that I wouldn't have to install the Google toolkit. I can't remember what it is, the SDK for Python, in like locally on my laptop. So it would actually install it in a container, and then it would go and get to work the spreadsheet. It was a complicated setup, but it worked pretty well. So I was a big fan.
Yeah. Well, and so when you took your esteemed academic position and left us behind. Anybody who's wondering why the sweet internet points went away, well, that might be why. All right, so with that, Langdon mentioned containers, and I'm going to use that as my segue to say that we're going to take a look at some of our most memorable episodes here, just to revisit, recap, do a retro, if you will, on the Level Up Hour. And so, unless I'm mistaken, I believe our first clip here is how to prepare for a RHEL 9 future. with Jim Nauer. Have I got that one right? Well,
the demo that we're going to do today is on RHEL system roles. And the reason I chose this one is because I know that Jim has been working on building his standard operating environment for RHEL 9. And I think that's one of the things that we're probably going to touch on during our discussion later. And one of the tools that we started shipping with RHEL 7, continued in RHEL 8, and will even more continue in RHEL 9, is RHEL system roles. So this is some Ansible roles that allow you to apply configuration to your system population. It comes with RHEL. We need to install the Ansible core RPM, which is going to give us the Ansible bits we need to run our playbooks.
Yeah, so first thing I'm noticing here is that Langdon changed a lot compared to the last video.
Yeah, I went all McStabby and and all that jazz. I still remember it might have been the first time I met Scott in person. We were doing a RHEL Summit, and I was like teaching a workshop or something. And now I don't remember what the T-shirt said, but it was like the lab minions. Lab. What was it? What was it? Henchman, yes, and it was a black shirt with gold writing on it, and Scott was running around making the workshops happen on the fly, and it was entertaining at the time. It has gotten significantly more, a lot simpler in more recent years, but we've passed for each other before, is basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, Minion. So, little known fact, Scott actually worked for me years ago, and we have this was back in the era when we had business cards, okay? And I guess some people still do. I haven't had any for a long time, to be honest, but we had this form that people could fill out and get their business card. One day, ring, ring, ring on my landline at my desk phone in the office, which also sounds like a very remote kind of concept at this point. I get called, and it's somebody from finance saying, "Yeah, we have a business card request here from Scott McBrien, and I just wanted to ask you that." I was like, yeah, okay. And and she said, "Well, here's the thing. For his job title, he has put Evil Winged Minion."
I am completely unsurprised.
And she said, "Are you okay with that?" I said, "Absolutely not. Strike the word evil."
Little did you know.
Little knowing as we spring out. All right, Steph, save us from ourselves here. We have another clip here. And I think this time, well,
I did want to throw out there the system roles, not only then, but still are very, very cool. I also, kind of a lot of those kind of admin-y tools like RHEL tools, the container as well, I always really liked as well. But sort of that out there. The system roles, I'm a big fan of that whole concept, and it's something that's been waiting on Linux for a long, long time. So just to tie back the actual episode.
No, well, there was actually some useful content there, right? And it's actually a very good discussion, I think, and a timely discussion because, RHEL 9 and, Jim Nauer actually, I think, talking through a lot of the kinds of things that a lot of, Red Hat's customers would be encountering, why they would want to go RHEL 9, the kinds of things that they would have to consider. It's an episode worth watching in its entirety and not just the little mini clip. So, all right, so I say again, Steph, save us from ourselves here. I think we're going to now take a look at, this is episode 14, When to Orchestrate with Scott McBrien.
So Scott, what we wanted to talk about was containers. And so one of the things that I've experienced, so I've been using containers now for a long time, And one of the things that I discovered pretty early on was that as soon as you kind of have two containers, they start to be a headache. And so I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts. What's your experience been? What does RHEL feel like about this? Or maybe Linux. I don't really mean RHEL like a Red Hat statement.
So I am newer to containers than you, but I think it depends on what your containers are doing and what kind of resources they're utilizing from the host. And we've been talking internally with folks like Scott McBrien, who's the product manager for containers, on when someone should look for another platform besides RHEL.
So, Scott, I mean, looking at that, a couple of thoughts. First, it seemed like you had put on a bit of weight, but we're not going to think about that because I think you are back to fighting trim. But beyond sort of that little personal observation, what would you sort of add to what you had to say there?
Well, first off, that was my first ever experience with the Level Up Hour, being a guest with Senor White. But I think that's a conversation still worth having today. Like, when do you move from Podman or Docker to something orchestrated like Kubernetes? Because there's a lot that you can do to automate your containers, but not necessarily orchestrate your containers. And a lot of that has to do with container complexity and interplay between containers. If you're going to something like a microservices architecture, all of a sudden things get really complex, and you need that additional orchestration that something like OpenShift would provide. So yeah, like, this is still a ongoing conversation, like when to orchestrate or not to orchestrate.
Well, I think that the conversation has become in some ways a bit easier because there's an easier on-ramp in a sense with single node. Jafar, would you tend to agree with that? It's like before, I think there was a big jump from, okay, I'm doing some things with containers, but am I ready to really go all in with Kubernetes, OpenShift, and all that it brings? But I think there's now this sort of intermediate step when you think about OpenShift and single node. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, sure. So, so I also had a question for you, Scott, before answering, which is, with all the content that has gone through the show, do you feel now more comfortable with containers? And in general, like 2 years after, did all the stuff that Langdon and you guys and us did help in some kind of way?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like, we'll end up seeing a couple more clips where I'm like setting up auto updates with Podman or a variety of other things, right? So over the last 2 years, we certainly have extended my capability with containers. Hopefully we extended our viewers' containers acumen as well.
Yeah, that's what I was aiming at, and I hope, as you said, it translated well to the viewers as well. And so, just to get back to the single node this conversation, yeah, I think that as Langdon said, when you're trying to use containers with like all the primitives, it kind of gets hard, and it's like a steep curve, a learning curve, because you have to deal with networking, you have to deal with storage, and basically how to have all your containers talk to each others, and how you expose them to get access, etc. So there's a whole lot of things you need, and setting that on your own on like a Linux box or something like that can be quite work intensive. And having something like single node OpenShift that really has the full capabilities of OpenShift, maybe like 99.9 or something like that, really helps you have that straightforward user experience with containers, with all those components already glued together, with things like networking, storage, routing, a user interface to help you deploy stuff without necessarily being like a Podman or Docker CLI guru and things like that. So yeah, I think it definitely helped. It helps in many cases. So the most obvious one when we are speaking about enterprise context is things like edge deployment and if you are in how do we call that manufacturing and you need to have like isolated platforms but in a very minimal footprint, that helps a lot. But another area where it can help a lot is also when you are trying to experiment on your own and you don't have like a whole data center on your hands. So yeah, you can try single node OpenShift on a very, I would say, realistic configuration, but still get all the capabilities that OpenShift provides.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that was kind of my thinking. I think Edge certainly is a use case that, if you think about full blown, multi-node, the entirety of, failover capable OpenShift, the idea of doing edge computing with that seems to be, it becomes a bit remote. But then when you think about it as a single node thing, then it starts to be, well, yeah, why would you not actually use that? And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting intermediate step, but I think there's still that sort of that interesting step at the container level. And then it's just that the OpenShift level has become much more varied, far more use cases that can apply to it. It's really evolved a lot. So anyway,
sorry, I was going to add one piece to that too. I think
sir.
the migration to it has also gotten significantly easier. And I think I swear I saw a Level Up Hour episode recently about using the cube generator out of Podman. And so kind of getting, kind of once you get it kind of all set up in Podman, now getting it generated out into something that then you can immediately kind of consume with OpenShift has also gotten significantly better, because I actually covered it like, I don't know, first like 10 episodes. Like it was a while back. And in fact, I have an open issue against that generator right now to further improve it. So I just, I think the movement to it, so not only getting, an instance of OpenShift deployed is significantly simpler, but kind of being able to, take what and then translate it to something that you can run in OpenShift and then kind of see how you could do it the next time yourself has also gotten way better.
Well, and just to continue the same theme, if we start thinking about sort of the managed services that are available, that you can now go to AWS, you can now go to Azure and respectively work with Rosa or Arrow and have a pretty straightforward path to actually standing up OpenShift and putting it to work and connecting it to a variety of cloud-based services. It's just that on-ramp has become ever more easy to get onto for ever more different workloads and approaches. And the one you mentioned is likewise a very interesting one, because it literally makes it the logical next step, as opposed to, okay, now let me start over with this, right?
Yeah,
all right.
And let's not forget about the developer sandbox, which goal is to do exactly that, like make it easier for anyone who wants to try out OpenShift, have like the real deal, but of course without needing any credit cards or not needing any dollars ahead. So yeah, it helps you try out, and then if you are convinced that you it fits your business needs, then you can move to a more enterprise grade offer like the ones that you mentioned.
Yep. All right. Well, so let's take a look at our next clip, which comes from episode 70. Is that right? Or 20? I need to wear my reading glasses. So this one is about Kubernetes and Docker depreciation. And this is where we need to cue some like ominous moan kind of music to, to set the stage.
All right, you should see VS Code. Is that what y'all are seeing? Okay, cool. Okay. So what I did was, obviously, I have a lot of experience with Podman, so that is first in my list here. But so we have, basically I just, I set up libvirt so that it has 4 CPUs and some RAM and whatever. But basically I just install Podman, Scopio, and Builda.
That was just a quick clip.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was an entertaining moment in the history of Kubernetes.
yeah, and so just a very quick comment before we move on topic. So we spent some time trying to figure out in which order we needed to put the excerpts, and now I'm thinking we should have used the Langdon's bird as a chronological way. Anyway, so getting back at this topic, what did I think you're on mute, Randy.
Yeah, my mistake. So, Doctor Depreciation. At this point, I don't think any, nobody's gathering with pitchforks and torches still, but perhaps there were a few back in the day. Thoughts on that Doctor Depreciation, Langdon?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, it was one of those things that was more smoke than fire in a lot of ways. But like many things, particularly on the internet, when there's a lot of smoke, there's a lot of smoke, so not only was the kind of event itself have a lot of I don't know, for lack of a better term, like drama, right? But it was also that particular episode. We kind of approached it maybe not the best way we possibly could, and so so we learned a lot from doing that episode about how we want to talk about those kinds of things in the future, and how we wanted to make sure that we made sure we softened the story before it came out. But it was but at the end of the day, what I think we did a really good job of in that show was kind of taking the fear factor out, or that's what we were trying to do. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. Hey, if you're running applications, this shouldn't actually affect you very much. It's mostly going down in the bowels of Kubernetes. And, for the vast majority of use cases, it's not really going to be an issue.
Yeah, and just regarding what you mentioned, regarding the transitioning from that period to the post Docker deprecation, I think that so I'm not very familiar with what happened exactly on the RHEL side, but yeah, I think by that time we were still using RHEL nodes and not yet CoreOS nodes when that happened. And yeah, I think it was RHEL 7 or something like that. And there was actually a very long enough, I would say, transition phase where on the OpenShift side, we were supporting not only Docker, but also Cryo. And so we introduced the ability for users to progressively try out Cryo instead of Docker, and have some nodes using Cryo, some other ones using Docker. And so I think in that sense, it helped our users transition from the previous one to Cryo, and having also the getting acquainted with the new tooling around it, like Podman and Scopio and all of the things that we have created to I would say replace some of those components that were all glued together in Docker as one single tool that did many things. I think we did a good job at breaking down those tools into very specialized ones, like Builda, Scopio, Cryo, for the container runtime, etc. Yeah. So like you said, although it seemed like a big deal at that time, and some customers might have been frightened by hearing that, I think the transition went pretty well afterwards, and um, yeah. So now I think we can safely look back at it and say that it was the right decision to do. Uh, so yeah, like you said, smoke but no fire.
Yep. Yep. And that's the thing, is sometimes the long-term right decision is not necessarily the most popular decision at the time, but time tends to sort such things out. So let me go to our next clip here, which is on the topic of SE Linux, containers and custom policy. And SE Linux is always one of those things that always has that aura of mystery and adventure and excitement about it. And so, Stephanie, do we have that clip? Jafar, are you ready for some command line wizardry here?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead. So,
All right.
Stand back.
That's right. Let's get ready. Got to loosen up. So what we're looking at is a Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.5 system. It does have SE Linux enabled and running. You can just check that with the SE status. So it's enabled. It's using a policy called the targeted policy, which is the normal one that we use for Red Hat Enterprise Linux these days. And so it's there. And if you've not seen SE Linux before, one of the other Red Hat Enterprise Linux shows touches on some of the basics for it. And just the rules of the road are put things where we expect, and know that SE Linux could be stopping things, so know where to look to troubleshoot.
So, Scott, anything to add on that subject of SE Linux? Because the thing about SE Linux is that it's an incredibly powerful capability. It has served its users well for these many years. We all know, the dirty secret out there in the open is that in a lot of contexts, a lot of scenarios, it gets turned off because turning it off is easier than leaving it on. So, but leaving it on is the best judgment and the best practice. So any further comments or elaboration on that?
I actually was going to mention what Langdon put in a chat, which is stop disabling selinux.com, because every time you disable SE Linux, Dan Walsh cries. And he's a very nice man. We don't want to make him cry more than needed.
Right, exactly.
And now he's a senior distinguished engineer. So as he clarified for me, I think he was mostly focused on the senior more than the distinguished engineer.
Well, with additional hard work, you can become a principal senior distinguished engineer. All right. Well, I hadn't seen this URL. I am so going to have to go there. But
that is a Major Hayden special, along with many others. He has a whole series that has HAZ whatever, I think it's like has IP. I don't know. I can't remember him. I'll throw him in the chat if I think of him. But Major Hayden, who last I knew is actually now a Red Hat employee, and is a rock star in so many ways. If you haven't seen him give talks, he actually has a great talk that he gave about imposter syndrome that I've heard many people reference as a really good treatise on the subject. So yeah, if you're unfamiliar with Major Hayden, he is somebody you should check out and follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's
all right. Well, and so yes,
he's back working on cloud stuff for Red Hat.
Cool. All right, so we have a few more clips that we are going to step through briskly. And this was actually an episode that I found particularly enjoyable and informative with our guest. I believe it was Mr. Scott McBrien, and this was on UBI Micro.
When we launched RHEL 8, we changed, we essentially released a subset of RHEL as free to redistribute so that it could be used in container images, and we called that UBI. And so Red Hat Universal Base Image, and we basically made at the time 3 base images a bunch of layered images that were things like Python, Ruby, PHP, you name it, like all these different programming languages, Java, .NET.
Well, so I was having a sort of a weird cognitive thing there where I'm seeing myself in this shirt, but my movements are not matching my actual movements. And then I realized the background was very different too. I think I've upped my background game, just to say, but to the more important topic of UBI micro, maybe let's get a quick summary of what UBI micro actually is and why anybody would care.
So UBI micro is the smallest possible selection of packages in a container that we could make that would give you a bash shell. So like there's no DNF package manager, there's no systemd, there's no anything nice that you would like to have. You get bash. So for people who are really concerned with things like container sizes because they're concerned about transfer rates or storage on some device where that container is going to live, that's what UBI micro is geared towards. So if you instead prefer like convenience of being able to do a DNF install something in your container environment, then micro is not for you. But if you instead want to be the most stripped down, least amount of packages, smallest possible container image, yet still maintained from Red Hat because it's a UBI, that's where micro fits its sweet spot.
Well, I think it's particularly interesting about UBI is the original UBI launched after the show started, and so we actually had. I think Scott on for that one too. I can't remember who, but we actually did an original episode about UBI, and then basically just after my last episode is when we started talking about UBI micro because I think it launched kind of in between. I will say I still use UBI today. So
yeah, sorry, Langdon. Maybe it's worth reminding our viewers what UBI is because. Yeah, you explained very well what micro is, like that it's trimmed down to the very least set of components, etc. But can we like remind what UBI is and why it was created?
Yeah, I mean, so with universal base image, I mean, I think McBrien talked about it a little bit, but I think it's really important to revisit. Is like it is a base image that has like a RHEL level of delivery, right? That you can base your applications on. So, the problem with a container, right, is that from line, you got to have it come from somewhere, right? And so you can have it come from the UBI and it will have a very it's a relatively large set of packages that are available to build into your application, and then you can redistribute that with your application, whether that be your custom software that you sell as a company, or whether you want to do that internally or whatever. And UBI, I think there's UBI, and then is there a UBI minimal and then UBI micro? I can't remember if there's 3.
Yeah, there's 4.
4.
So there's so the
Super
largest
micro?
one is UBI init, which includes a full systemd stack. So if you're doing like containerizing a monolith that has a bunch of services that need to be started, that might be a place to start. Then there's standard, which is UBI. Then there is minimal, which is smaller than standard, but includes a micro DNF implementation. So you can't use DNF. You actually have to use a command line tool called micro DNF, which is smaller. And there's some weird things you have to do for enabling modular content, for example, with micro DNF. That's a little bit different structure of commands than you would use with regular DNF.
I feel like we may have actually done an episode where we dug into a little bit of that with you, Scott.
I think so. And then the like bottom one is, or least large one is micro. But
well,
yeah,
I just had a thought. If you have UBI, you have UBI micro, you have UBI minimal, you have all of that. What is UBI macro? That's RHEL.
Exactly.
So you have all your options. All right. Well, so any further comments on the world of the universal base image, which I think is actually a very central part of this world? All right. Hearing none. our
I just
next,
pasted the link. If somebody can drop it in the messages.
Yeah.
That's the
oh,
UB
Jafar. Okay, I'm on it. Here we go.
I got it.
Oh, see, look at that.
Thank you, guys.
We've doing all the
That-
chats.
That's some skills right there. Okay, so
I was actually just talking to a student about how occasionally I have to teach some of the classes virtual. Well, not classes virtual, but like a student is virtual because, they're either sick or what I was really common last semester was that they're perfectly fine, but they had a close contact with somebody with COVID, right? So I don't want them coming to class. So they would attend class virtually, but you would usually do the class recorded in Zoom, and the Zoom chat I cannot like real time follow and also talk. So it's like I was very tempted to just switch all of my classes, just be live broadcast on Twitch, and just do it that way,
and feel masterful on the platform.
Exactly, because that one I can follow and continue to type and talk at the same time.
Well, I continue to seek the platform that works that way for me. So, next episode, this one, I love the title of it because it sounds so fresh. It sounds like something off of TikTok or something, and that's unboxing Red Hat OpenShift.
So here, as you can see, I'm logged in as an administrator. And if we look at some things like OAuth, we have the ability to automatically add new identity providers from the UI. I can say, for instance, I want to configure GitHub or LDAP configuration, or just upload a new HC password. And the operator that is responsible for this section here, which is basically OAuth in OpenShift, is going to see that there's a change request, which is I want to add a new identity provider, and it's going to automatically reconfigure that specific operator.
Well, so this was actually, I love this particular episode because it was absolutely a fly through OpenShift. We saw so much in that one episode, and so we've got, like I said, we've got 68 episodes. This one might be safely missed, except for as a reference to other episodes you might want to check out. But we've got these 68 great episodes. This one was, if you want to have a under 1 hour fly through OpenShift, this was going to be it. So, Jafar, what was some of what you were thinking that you wanted to include in there? What were your goals with that particular episode?
Yeah, so obviously one of the big things that we wanted to touch upon was what OpenShift brings compared to just using a RHEL box or RHEL boxes to host containers. So explain the concept of what a platform brings, like all the services that it provides out of the box. And so one of the concepts that I was talking about is key in how OpenShift has been architected, which is operators. And it's basically this notion that every bit of the puzzle, like networking, storage, routing, the UI, the authentication, etc., is managed by an operator, and this operator is managing basically making that specific feature work, and makes it easier for upgrades, makes it easier for administrators. And I think what I was trying to show there is that, so for instance, if people have been familiar with OpenShift 3, just to add a new identity provider, you had to go through a configuration file that you had to manually change and with the proper syntax, etc. And then you had to go through all the masters and restart them, etc. And then after that, you would have some of those changes applied to the cluster. And it might even, in some cases, need restarting nodes and stuff like that. Whereas here with OpenShift, just the fact that you are going through the UI, making your changes, the operator picks that up in the background, refreshes whatever it needs to refresh, and then you can log out and have your new identity provider. It's like a day and night type of experience, and not only for the end users but also for the administrators. And so, yeah, I think that's what I was trying to show. So, on one side, what OpenShift provides in terms of features, but on the other side, how easier it is for administrators to maintain that platform
Yeah.
and upgrade it, etc.
Yeah, no, it's a great fly through. So, Langdon, if you were standing before your fresh-faced youngsters at Boston University and you had just, a short opportunity to tell them what OpenShift is and about and so on, what would be your big themes?
So basically what I normally talk about is kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is that the need for things like OpenShift is not immediately apparent to when you're doing kind of software development in particular. Like for a sysadmin, I think it becomes more apparent faster. But basically, as soon as you start to actually do anything for real, you really start to notice that it's really difficult to keep track of all the bits, right? So even if you're using virtual machines, as soon as you get something slightly sophisticated, because you have a separation of concerns with, web servers and, database servers or whatever, you start needing to manage those things. So much so that, it created a company like VMware who made a ton of money helping you solve that problem. Containers are the next level worse, right? Is like, because they get so much smaller, they're so much more specialized, and they're so much more upgradable and all that stuff, that the orchestration of them becomes really difficult, really fast. And so that's where things like OpenShift really come in. And the really nice thing about OpenShift is that it's not just a whole bunch of YAML, right? Is that now you can actually get a sense of what the scale of your environment is, because I think hardcore programmers, hardcore sysadmins don't give enough credence to why visuals are often really important, and part of it is because just to kind of wrap your head around, your single application, which is using, let's say a small application, it's using 10 containers, right? But then it's got various ones of them in auto scaling kind of scenarios. Wrapping your head around what's going on is very difficult. I was just on the show actually yesterday talking about how difficult it is to debug distributed systems, and so if you can't even get your head wrapped around the actual system, trying to figure out what is happening when something fails is like next level hard. So that's where I talk about for kind of first step why orchestration matters, and then on top of that why visualization with things like OpenShift and and some of that point and click stuff helps you get your head wrapped around what's happening.
Well, you raise an interesting point about the point and click stuff, and it actually relates in my mind to sort of why this is our final episode, is that, I have held it as a truth for a long time that if you're going to be an OpenShift administrator, that you needed to have some mastery of Linux system administration, and you had to be comfortable and familiar with the command line. I think that the technology has evolved to the point where that's no longer the case. And to the point you're making, in fact, that's not going to even be enough the case, because you do need to have the ability to manage at a level of abstraction, because you're not going to be able to, there's only so much under the hood you can actually get into. And so, I've spent these many weeks sometimes with Jafar doing all kinds of remarkable, incredibly detailed things, and never pulling up a command line. And so I think it kind of comes full circle back to that. It's no longer necessary to be that person to use OpenShift, and in fact, I think what you would be arguing is that it's even desirable to set that thinking aside and to embrace the fact that you now have to think in a different way around all these containers and all the complexities of a distributed system. Now, Scott, you may take issue.
As the resident command line monkey, yes, I have to disagree there. So while graphical tools are awesome and they do a lot of things, I don't think every person needs to have the nth degree of specialty to be able to debug every problem. But there is something to be said about having a cadre of people with a really deep understanding of what's happening on the platform, the container, the tool, because I don't know if all of us have been there, but I've certainly been in the place where we've deployed something, a new updated application, and things don't go well. And
Never once.
Doesn't happen for us.
No.
Not in here.
developers operations like back and forth, right? I'm like, your app's broken. They're like, no, you changed something on the servers. And then we have to like work together to figure this out. And it's like, I bring the systems expertise and they bring the application expertise, and together we can piece together what's really going on.
Yeah.
If you don't have the systems expertise and you don't know like what's going on beyond your objects or your container, then when you run into those situations, you're just kind of like flying in the dark, hoping for the best.
I think you make a very good point. I would say everybody doesn't need to know everything, but there's always a benefit in knowing more, because I think back to a professor I had, long ago when I was in college, when somebody asked, is this going to be on the exam? And his answer was, well, I'd never recommend being as ignorant as you can get away with. It's always good to know. It's always good to know more. The question is whether it's mandatory that you know everything. And I think there's been an evolution with this over time. Jafar, you had a comment as well.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for the kind comments about the content. But just to comment on what you said, and also what all of you guys said. So clearly, one of the areas that we have invested a lot is what you mentioned, which is making it easier for non-terminal gurus to be able to understand what's going on, to be able to configure stuff, but also inject as much automation within the platform itself so that you don't need to have that knowledge yourself. It's basically this whole notion of operators, which is like a core key design in OpenShift, is that the knowledge is in the operator and is not in the lively operator. So that's one key aspect. And that explains why not a lot of things are happening through like CLI wizardry. And the other reason for that is that the platform itself, so compared to like the previous way of doing things, you had like Linux gurus or Linux admins that were able to go on a Linux box and make a lot of changes to the configuration files and restart services, blah, 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 etc. But then
Okay.
I guess he was done talking. I was going to add one quick thing, which is I think what we're kind of all getting at, right, is that it's always a pendulum, and if you swing too hard on either end of the pendulum, a lot of the times there's going to be a problem. Because I was going to give you the example, with Scott, right? It's like I still remember when I was freelancing, I got called in for a project to basically fix a website, and a very simple website to boot. And I'm digging around into the system and discover that the prior person who had built the website in the first place had done a custom kernel to run his Apache web server. So the fact that you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. And part of the challenge is knowing where on that pendulum you should be. And I think the other point is that Randy, which I think you were kind of getting at, was like, we can all have our various expertise and then kind of a lighter knowledge of a bunch of other things. And then when we have a problem that spans those things, we can kind of come together and work together on a problem. And this is one of the great things about the open source world, right? Is that we're not limited to the people who work in our organization. We can actually work with people who are outside the organization as well.
Indeed. when we talk about open source, it can even be with somebody as a competitor, right? Which is an interesting but absolute reality in the world of open source. So,
yeah, Scott, just one comment. So things.
Oh, you're back. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, of course we invested a lot in the UI stuff, etc. But let's not forget that everything in OpenShift is like it's everything as code or API driven, meaning that instead of having to do like CLI wizardry, now you have everything as configuration files, and then that gets picked up by the platform itself to be able to apply configurations that will replace your scripts, basically. Instead of writing like imperative logic to do stuff and install things, etc., you describe the desired state of the platform, like the upgrades, the components you want to install, the configuration, and then you're able to apply that like using GitOps approaches or stuff like that. So even configuring the underneath RHEL core OS goes that way. So I think that's like a big change in the way administrators look at what they do, basically.
Yep. Well, and so we have gone way over because we've been having a good time here on our last episode of the Level Up Hour, and so I think we are. I think we're going to draw this to a close, even though we had a. Well, okay. So Stephanie is insisting that we show one more clip.
I will point out though that our one rule about the Level Up Hour was that it should never be an hour, and I think we did have one episode that was exactly 60 minutes, but it was a mistake. So
yeah, no, and that will never ever happen. So we have now completed a tradition, and so we do have one last clip that I think there's multiple reasons that are good. One is it actually gets us into the world of OpenShift Plus, where we have some of these additional capabilities that are worth talking about, and it's on DevSecOps. And so, the thing is let's get as many things that have dev in it and ops in it and sec in it. We need to get Git wedged in there somewhere, and we'll have them all covered, right? So let's take a look at this last clip and see what we got.
So what we're going to look at is basically a CI/CD pipeline that takes our application code from a Git repository, does some application. So what we're going to look at is basically a CI/CD pipeline that takes our application code from a Git repository, does some application scanning, then use some third-party solutions to check if there are some vulnerability issues in terms of code, etc. Then we will build the application into a container image that will get pushed to Quay. So Quay is installed on OpenShift. We are not using Quay.io in this case. We are really using a containerized Quay instance that runs on OpenShift itself. Then afterwards, once everything is finished, we want to have some security gates that are maintained by ACS, where once the image is in the registry, we want to make sure that there are no blocking or critical vulnerabilities. If everything is fine, then we can move on and deploy the application to multiple clusters.
Yeah, so once again, I'm in the same shirt and having that moment of, wait a minute, that's not me. But it is me. So this topic fit in very well with the idea of, OpenShift Container Platform Plus, which includes Advanced Cluster Manager, Advanced Cluster Security, and Quay. And so, we were talking earlier about sort of the lowest end of the on-ramp into OpenShift and single node and some other things like that. I guess I would characterize I would characterize OpenShift Plus as the other end of the spectrum, where you want to have multi-cluster, you want to have advanced security, and you need to be doing Quay in a very different way. So some thoughts on that, and sort of this, maybe specifically about DevSecOps to kind of close us out. Don't all talk at once.
Yeah, so I think it really plays well with the comment that Langdon made, which is this notion of visuals and understanding like the whole landscape. Especially, so if you are speaking about an application that is running locally in one single namespace, I think you can do well. 5 containers, not an issue. Today we have customers who have applications that are made of hundreds of containers, like 100, 200 containers that are spread out around tens of clusters. How do you get a grasp of what's running where, and if there are issues with any components, etc.? So that's the first thing. Like as an admin or as the one who is in charge of the SLAs, etc., how do you know that everything is fine? How do you know that everything is compliant? So this kind of tooling that we add with OpenShift Plus, especially when you are in a multi-cluster environment, gives you these capabilities to be basically able to say, okay, let's have a look at this application and tell me all the 10 clusters that it runs on, what components are where, are they healthy? And speaking of like terminals, you can even say, oh, okay, so this application is running on like this cluster that is running in Asia, in AWS or Azure. Give me a terminal to that cluster, or give me a terminal to that pod that is running on this cluster, and then give me another terminal to another pod that is running on a different region, etc. So it gives you a lot of, I would say, capabilities when you're trying to troubleshoot as well and trying to understand what's going on. So yeah, I would say the OpenShift Plus, as the name implies, gives you more capabilities, and these ones that I spoke about come, for instance, from ACM, the Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes, but it also has those security capabilities where you are able to scan container images or also detect malicious things that are happening in the applications at runtime, like if there's a malicious process that is trying to escape from a container and do malicious things on other containers, you can have ways to mitigate that and block that issue and not let it propagate to your cluster and things like that. So yeah, it definitely gives a lot of added value. But again, as you said, it's like the other end of the I would say the experience. Like the single node is like on the lowest,
Smallest.
yeah,
Well, yeah.
and OpenShift Plus is like on the other side of it.
Yeah. OpenShift Plus gives you that puppeteer power over everything that Steph has over all of us as we wrap up the level up hour. And so just real quickly here, first of all, I think, if you're interested in learning more, trying out things and so on, I think we'll drop a couple of links there in the chat. But real quickly here, let's go in forward chronological order. Langdon, any parting thoughts on the level up hour and this journey we've been on for 69 episodes?
Well, so quickly, I would like to mention I feel a little attacked because I came back to my original environment for shooting the show. If you watch the KBEI show, you'll see I usually do it from my office. It has a nice background. I have a nicer mic, etc. But I wanted everyone to see the cool wall behind me again.
Your wall is waving, by the way.
Yes, it does that sometimes. We don't really talk about why. So, long story short, like I said, we launched the show really having no idea what we were doing. I thought the gamification stuff that we did was really awesome. I thought it came out really well. I really appreciate all the people who participated. I really appreciated all the guests we eventually had on the show, because originally it was just a show about me building stuff, and then we, kind of introduced, other people coming on the show, and that worked out really well. And so, just all in all, I really, it really got me into this whole streaming thing, and I really appreciate it. I think it's been a lot of fun. And thanks again to everyone who are a loyal audience. I don't know how many of them. Bacon Fork, I just saw popped in, for example, but some of our longtime, attendees and audience members, and I really appreciate it. So sorry for that long-winded remark, but that's I've loved it. I really, I've missed it since I left the show.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming back, Langdon. It's been a lot of fun. So Scott, parting thoughts from the world of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Scott McBrien, Stabby Mick.
I mean, now you're putting me on the spot to put together something pithy and interesting. How about I say containers are Linux? And we
exactly.
Still are, still will be. And you've got a great shirt. It looks like it has some characteristics similar to the wall behind Langdon. And so finally, my last co-host here, the man, myth, legend, Mr. Jafar Traibi. Any parting thoughts, Jafar?
Yeah, so I really wanted to thank you all guys for the time and effort that was put in the show. And for me, before joining like the TMM team, I used to be a solution architect, meeting a lot of customers, doing those demos, trying to explain some concepts, some maybe complicated concepts into simple words in short period of time. And I kind of got away from that for some time, and the show gave me a good opportunity to reconnect with that past experience. And so I hope that there was at least a bit of interesting content in what we saw, and that it gave our viewers a better understanding of some of the components of OpenShift. And so thank you guys, and thanks for Stephanie for setting all those weekly episodes and chasing us for
a thankless task if there ever was one. Stephanie, any parting thoughts? Nope.
Oh, me? Myself?
No, the other Stephanie.
Oh. It's been a pleasure doing the show. I mean, the OpenShift TV and streaming, created an opportunity for me to get into Red Hat. I love doing this. In my opinion, I have the easy job. So, I just pull strings behind the scenes.
Puppeteer. Well, yeah, so
I always said one day I'm going to do a demo, but you all have to just script it, and then
we should have done one more episode where you did a demo. That would have finished things out beautifully. So, anyway, thank you everybody for this last show. I've enjoyed doing these a lot. As I've been in that corner of purgatory known as middle management, it's nice to get onto this show and dig deep into some of these topics and learn a lot more about some things, and sometimes I get the opportunity to. So it's been really great. Many thanks to all the people who have watched us over these episodes. I would say if you are coming new to this episode, we do have lots of episodes that you can cover that I think are still relevant, still very informative and worth watching. And so again, there are opportunities to learn more about OpenShift. We are going to be offering more streaming and more different things coming up. Our retirement of this particular corner of the Red Hat streaming universe by no means means that we are getting out of that. It just means that we are moving in new directions. And so with that, I wish everybody a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening. And thank you for watching the Level Up Hour.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.